Hello everyone and welcome for this new episode of Teach Yourself to Draw, a series of videos focused on drawing and self-education with resources you can use if you're learning by yourself. To download the picture that I'm using for this project, you can follow the link in the description below, and this is the second son in our Laocoon series. We've already made one of the sons, and the next one is going to be the father, Laocoon himself. This episode is going to be about charcoal, and we'll see why charcoal is a great drawing medium and how it is a transition somehow between drawing and painting. If you practice drawing, but ultimately you want to learn painting at some point, you need to start drawing with charcoal. Why? Well, because charcoal is very light and fluid. You know, when you put your finger in charcoal, it leaves a mark, doesn't it? Well, that's what I mean when I say that charcoal is fluid. It's not really fluid, but it's the closest that we have. Charcoal is a powder, but it can be brushed and moved around, a little bit like paint. It's not the same, of course. You don't have to worry about drying time. You can erase charcoal as much as you want, and you can still put all your drawing skills to focus on values with charcoal. You don't have to worry about colors. So I would say that if you're not feeling ready to paint yet because you think that you don't have the drawing skills necessary to paint very easily and with a lot of confidence, then studying charcoal and practicing charcoal drawing, focusing on values and focusing on proportions, getting better accuracy with charcoal is going to be the ideal transition, and it's going to make your transition to painting much easier and much more natural. So for this exercise, which you can follow along using the resources that are on my website, we are not going to use a stomp, which is just a blending tool. We're not going to talk about blending that much. Instead, we'll use various brushes. I'll use old brushes that I found in my studio, rounds, flats, natural or synthetic, old brushes that you can find, have a varied selection. Also, I'm using a silicone brush that can be helpful to shape the drawing. And by the way, these are sometimes called shapers. And I'm also going to use a little skewer, of course, a kneaded eraser, and of course some sandpaper to sharpen the charcoal stick. My paper is Arches watercolor paper, pure cotton. Strong paper is recommended because you're going to erase a lot and you're not going to be very nice to the surface. So a weak paper is going to be damaged easily. And of course, as far as charcoal go, you want natural charcoal. Don't get anything that's compressed charcoal or anything like this. You don't need it, because anything that has a binder in it that's not just pure burnt wood is not going to work the same because it doesn't have the same fluidity. So everything I'm going to be talking about only works with natural charcoal. My favorite brand, if you know me, is Nineteenth because it's a really good quality charcoal. It's not the darkest, but it comes in various degrees of hardness. You have B, HB, and H, and you can use them to really control the values and control the pressure and sharpen the charcoal sticks to a very fine point and make something very, very precise. Alright, before I jump into the techniques of this video, I really wanted to thank all my patrons on Patreon, because without their support, this video and this series of videos wouldn't be possible. So thank you again to all my patrons. Alright, so let's start this drawing and let's try to be very painterly in our approach. If you follow many of my painting videos, you know that I often say that the first stages are very similar to charcoal. I make a black mix, spread it on the surface, and then work out the shapes by wiping off the highlights. And I often say, well, I start my painting just like if it was charcoal with paint. And here, this is exactly what I'll do. First, I will darken the entire surface with a big charcoal stick, leaving the bottom slightly lighter. And then with a large brush, I simply soften everything to get an even dark tone all over the surface. I hope that you can see what I mean when I talk about the fluidity of charcoal. It's not many drawing mediums that you can just brush away with a big brush like this and spread around to get something very even and uniform, very soft and light. Now, with my eraser, I'm just going to start tracing the drawing by actually removing some of this charcoal. It is so light, it is so sensitive to pressure that I can just draw by removing some of the powder. I place my plumb line and I'm going to start actually making the drawing, but not as much with more charcoal, but more by removing the paint and by working on big masses of values. First, very big, messy shapes, but slowly I'll push the powder around to create a more and more accurate drawing. If you saw the previous episodes, you might think, what about the 5 stages of drawing? Well, let me remind you what they are. The block-in is when you start the drawing with lines. The mass-in is when you start drawing with big masses of values, still working on proportions. The modeling is when you start implementing the halftones and the transitions. The rendering is going for the right texture and the right transition and the right edges. And the finishing step is just, the final things that you do in the end, fixing everything, putting the final details. So what about these stages? Well, they are still all present in this project, even though we can't really see them separately. It's a good thing that we've learned to isolate them and see them separately in the previous episode where I was using graphite, but in reality, everything is more or less happening at the same time, especially the first 3 stages. So these 5 steps shouldn't be seen as a sort of chronological order, but more as a methodical point of view. With charcoal, block-in, mass-in, and modeling, they all happen at the same time because I have all this black pigment on the surface already. And now it's just a matter of putting everything at the right spot. So everything is sort of happening simultaneously. It still exists separately, but it's more or less happening at the same time. Instead of seeing with lines, which is what we are doing with graphite, and just as a reminder, lines are imaginary. Charcoal forces us to see the drawing with big masses of values, and this is exactly what paint also does. It forces you to see in big masses of color. Here we don't have any color to worry about. We just have value to worry about, and it's already complicated enough. So working with charcoal is a very good preparation if you want to jump from drawing to painting. I work with all the same techniques that I've covered in the previous episodes. Plumb line, top and bottom, finding anchor points, getting the proportions right. It's all still valid. I still worry about blocking, massing, modeling, except that this time it's all happening at the same time, and it's all happening with big shapes of values instead of lines. I don't use any lines. I jump directly into the values and into the big masses, the big shapes. It looks very messy in the beginning, but in my head, the structure is still there, which is why all the previous episodes are important, and I really encourage you to watch them again if you forgot. It's very important to have the structure in your head, even though the drawing looks very messy and very out of control. If you have the structure in your head, if you know the underlying principles, you're going to be okay, and ultimately you're going to refine the drawing to create a very, very accurate and well-proportioned version of your drawing. Doesn't seem like much, but this methodical shift is actually crucial because that's how painting works. You can't paint with lines. So if you want to learn painting one day, charcoal is a great transitional medium because it forces you to not use lines as much. Paint is fluid, it moves around all the time. The result is that it's kind of messy when you paint. It's hard to control the shapes. A brush is not as easy to control as a very sharp graphite pencil. So the approach with painting is to start with big masses and then slowly make the shapes more and more accurate. This is the strategy that you have to use for painting, and this is exactly the same strategy that you can use with charcoal. I use all the tools at my disposal, small brushes. They aren't just here to blend, they are here to push the powder, remove charcoal, make things more light, more soft, more blurry. Actually, charcoal is so light that you can push it around on the paper just like a broom pushes the dust around. My eraser is the most fundamental tool I have. The most fundamental tool that I have is my eraser. I can shape it to a fine point. I don't use it just to erase and correct, but I actually use it more to shape the drawing and sculpt the masses of values from the light side. With charcoal, I try to avoid drawing lines as much as possible, unless I can really use them for proportions. Sometimes, it's easy to draw a line, and if it can help you make the proportions better, then it's a good idea to do so. But I try to avoid to give them too much importance in the drawing. Most of the time, the lines with charcoal might seem that they are problematic. Why? Because they are all, fuzzy and messy. Actually, it's a good thing. What you want is first, a thick line, and then with your eraser, reshape the line from both sides to make it more accurate and actually make it sharp. You will need to sharpen your charcoal stick, but the best tool to make things really sharp with charcoal is actually the eraser. Half of the time, I don't use the charcoal, but I use my brushes and my eraser. I don't really need to add more pigment. It's already here. I just need to put it at the right spot and have the right amount of powder exactly at the right place. It sounds complicated, sounds messy, but if you have all the previous stages in your head, if you have the structure that we've gained from the previous episodes already in your head, it's going to be a lot easier, which is why we often start with graphite. Graphite is easier to control because it works with lines. Now we don't have lines anymore, and you have to just control the mess by pushing the dust around. That's how it works, and it's more similar to painting than graphite is. It seems very messy at first, but with experience using this approach, you'll see that it goes way faster than graphite. To complete a drawing with graphite, it takes a lot of time, especially if you want to make all the values right. But with charcoal, it's already there. It's already there, all the values. Everything is covered. You have pretty much the entire surface covered in just a few seconds. Now it's just a matter of pushing everything where it needs to be. And it goes so much faster. Actually, if you have the experience and if you make things in order, so first practice with graphite because it's easier, then practice with charcoal, and then practice with paint, you'll see that you'll go progressively faster, and not just because you'll get better. Sure, you'll get better, but because graphite is very slow, which is why it's better for beginners, charcoal is way faster, and paint is even faster because you jump right into the core of the subject. It goes so fast with brushes. So this is what I'm gonna do for this entire drawing. I always respect the fundamental rule. I go from simple to complex, from thick to thin, from wide to narrow, from big to small. I follow all the stages that I've covered in the previous videos, the blocking, the massing, the modeling, but I do it all at the same time. I try to keep my charcoal stick as sharp as possible all the time, and I try to really control the pressure that I use on the paper when I use it. I try to use my tiny brushes not just to blend. The idea of blending is kind of a misleading idea. It sounds good, but just blending is not enough to get an accurate charcoal drawing. You need more than blending. Blending is fine, but it's not a core principle of getting an accurate drawing. You can't just say, all right, I'm gonna put some charcoal here and blend everything. You're gonna end up with a big mush, something really that doesn't have any shape. What you want is to preserve the shape, to be accurate in the values, to be very descriptive in how the transitions go from one to the next. That's not blending. That's describing the values, describing the transitions with a very fine and very precise approach. If you have the right structure in your head, you'll see that the transition from graphite to charcoal is not going to be that hard. It's going to be about, all right, how do I control this messy thing that makes my fingers all black? You'll understand charcoal when at the end of your drawing your fingers aren't black. If you can control the mess, if your fingers aren't full of charcoal dust at the end of your session, if it's just a tiny bit maybe, but if you can control the mess, you'll control charcoal. It's a messy thing, but so is painting. It's very messy. Sure, graphite is a very reassuring drawing medium because, well, you know, it's very sharp, it's very precise. But are you sure that you're using the sharpness that graphite allows to create the good thing? Graphite doesn't have enough darkness. Graphite doesn't have enough fluidity. So you're going to become a very good draftsman for drawing with graphite. But if you ultimately want to learn to paint someday, you need to start doing this transition to charcoal. It's really an essential transitional stage, and it's going to help you tremendously. Maybe also if you already paint, but you have started painting, but you don't really control the proportions, and all your portraits look very strange and they don't have the right degree of likeness that you would like, and you're wondering what's wrong with the way I paint. Well, maybe you need to practice portrait first with charcoal, or you need to practice some techniques first with charcoal. Get a good hand, get a sharp eye that can spot the mistakes, that can spot where the values needs to go darker, how to make better edges and stuff with charcoal. Behave with the charcoal just like if it was paint. And then when your eye is really, really strong at spotting these things that can be fixed in the drawing, then you'll see that it's going to be much more natural to switch to painting, and you will control the mess a lot easier, because at least your eye and your brain will have the practice, the training to understand how to control everything, how to keep the proportions together, how to keep the likeness, even if things move around constantly. Because that's what charcoal does. It does move around. It's a very chaotic thing, and you have to focus on putting it all under control. There is no binder in charcoal. It's just dust. It's just powder. And you can use brushes with charcoal. I recommend that you use brushes. It's a great way to understand how brushes can shape the value from the biggest block that you have to build in the very beginning to the modeling, the transition, the halftones, all the way to the finest details that a very sharp charcoal stick is going to allow you to draw. I encourage you to follow along with this exercise. You can download the picture on my website and start practicing charcoal as well. When you feel ready, you're gonna feel ready to start painting. And the next episode is going to be a teach yourself to draw episode, but actually we're gonna paint. We're gonna draw with paint in black and white. The final episode in our series about the Laocoon is going to be painting the Laocoon in grisaille with actual paint. So I hope you're ready, and I'll see you for the next episode. Thank you again to all my patrons on Patreon. Just as a reminder, if you want to support the channel, please consider joining. I would appreciate so much. It helps the channel so much. So thank you to all my patrons. Again, the support has been tremendous. So really need to thank you. Alright, that's it for this video. If you liked it, don't hesitate to like and subscribe. I'll see you for the next episode, and until then, have fun drawing. Bye.